The world of Vascor 9 was dust and ore, stripped to the bone by centuries of relentless mining. Its surface was a fractured husk of rust-coloured rock, its skies heavy with ash, and its people grimy, stubborn, and forgotten. The Imperium bled the planet dry, digging deep for trace metals once used in constructing void ship hulls. When the veins ran thin, so did the oversight. Vascor became a graveyard of machines and men, operated only by the desperate and the damned. Kale Brenner wasn't born on Vascor, but he'd lived there long enough to feel like he'd never leave. A former guardsman turned security foreman, he had watched the slow unravelling of discipline and morale. When the first death started, no one paid attention. Miners died all the time. Accidents, collapses, fights. But these were different. It started in Sector 14C, a collapsed shaft where something ancient had been unearthed. No one had clearance to open it, but someone did anyway. The Vox recordings from that day were sealed by order of the Administrum, but Kale had heard whispers, wild, fevered whispers, of symbols carved in obsidian, of a voice in the dark that didn't echo right, of miners who walked back to camp smiling, their eyes vacant, their voices jumbled like they were speaking in shattered prayers. The official report called it atmospheric toxicity incident. Unofficially, something was very wrong. Kale stood in the command hub of Habination Unit Theta 4, watching the feed flicker. Red lights blinked across sectors, communications lost, power surges, sensor ghosts. They were all dismissed by the tech priests as solar interference. Another one went missing last night, said Mira Kess, the logistics officer. Her voice was a hoarse whisper. Second one this week. Shift led, said he walked out smiling. Said he was going to offer himself to the Eater below? Kale turned. What? That's what he said. Exact words. The Eater below. And then he laughed. Mira didn't smile. Neither did Kale. 3 hours later, they were hauling the man's body out of a maintenance tunnel. His chest was torn open, the heart gone. Surrounding him were etchings, symbols, carved with jagged tools into the ferrocrete. Spiral eyes, jagged teeth, circles within circles. The Medicae said it looked ritualistic. Said the man had done it to himself. That was when Kale put it in a distress signal. Not a minor request. Not a call for aid. A full Category Alpha quarantine flag. It took 3 days for the first Imperial landers to arrive, sleek Valkyries bearing the seal of the Ordo Sepulchrum, the branch of the Inquisition that dealt with plagues and madness. Behind them came black-armoured Tempestus, Scions with pale, silent officers who said nothing and asked too much. Kale and Mira were summoned to a debrief in Relay Dome Gamma, along with 3 other survivors who'd made the report. The lead inquisitorial agent, a woman with hollow cheeks named Inquisitor Sale Nerva, asked questions that didn't make sense. Have you seen shadows that speak when no one's there? Have any of your crew smiled for no reason for longer than 17 seconds? Has anyone mentioned the phrase, the world underneath the world? Kale's skin crawled. They're hiding something, Mira said when they turned. They know what this is. They've seen it before. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was too late. Infected workers began to act in groups. They spoke in broken tongues, but moved with eerie synchronicity, like they were following orders no one could hear. They overwhelmed entire sectors, dragging uninfected workers into the dark. Security stations went dark, civilians stopped trusting each other. Kale and Mira held together a ragtag band of survivors, an engine tech named Rulo, a young Medicaid assistant called Dren, and Lysa, a scavenger with too many knives and not enough fear. They fortified the lower tunnels of the West Shaft Reserve, far more than the main complex. The supplies were low, but it was quiet, for now. That night, Kale couldn't sleep. He wandered down a narrow corridor and found Dren staring at a wall. "What are you doing?" Kale asked. Dren turned slowly, too slowly, and smiled. "I was just listening." "Can't you hear it?" he whispered. "It's singing now. It's so beautiful." Kale saw the twitch in his eyes, the crooked grin, his fingers twitching like they wanted to draw something. He drew his las pistol. Dren's smile widened, but he didn't move. Kale hesitated, then pulled the trigger. The next morning, the others said nothing, but something in their expressions shifted. They were beginning to understand. They'd all seen it. The signs, the smile, the incoherence, the strange devotion. The virus wasn't just in the blood, it was in the mind, and it was spreading. Worse, the infected were working together. They weren't just insane, they were organising, drawing symbols in their blood, building strange shapes in the tunnels of metal scraps and bone. Whispers began to carry through the pipes. Kale swore he heard a voice say his name, more than once. That afternoon, Mira intercepted a transmission. It was short, panicked. "The scions are gone. Repeat. Outer perimeter lost. I repeat, they..." Static. A scream. Then silence. By nightfall, Kale knew. They'd been abandoned. The Imperium had seen the signs. The virus wasn't natural. It wasn't just a sickness. It was a corruption. A psychic infection that had turned men into priests of a forgotten god, clawing up from the crust of Vascor 9, and the Emperor's forces had fled. Vascor was lost. Now they had to survive. The wind howled through the broken vents of the lower shaft, carrying with it a dry rhythmic whisper, like a chant just below the range of hearing. Kale hated that sound. It didn't matter how deep they went, Vascor 9 always found a way to whisper back. Their camp was cramped, just a converted ore storage room. Crates formed makeshift walls, and a battered servitor served as a sentry, its one working eye glowing dim red in the dark. Survivors slept in shifts. Now no one trusted anyone long enough to let them watch alone. Myra kept the log. "This is day 12 since the outbreak," she said quietly into a battered Vox recorder. Imperial forces arrived, but retreated after confirmed infection breaches. "We are alone. Kale executed Dren yesterday. He smiled too much." Her voice cracked. "Supplies down to 34 ration packs. Filtration systems is running, but failing. Ambient whispers increasing in frequency. Everyone hears them now." She stopped the recording and looked across at Kale, who sat cleaning his las pistol like a ritual. "We need to move soon," he said without looking up. "They're getting bolder." "How do you know?" Mira asked. He motioned towards the hallway. On the wall, freshly drawn in what looked like blood, was a crude symbol, a circle inside a jagged mouth. It hadn't been there yesterday. They moved again that night, deeper into the mining tunnels, where the abandoned drills slept like titans beneath sheets of dust. Rulo, the engine tech, led the way. He knew the maps better than anyone, where the shafts curved, where lifts still worked, where the collapses were worst. They walked in silence, except for Liza, who kept muttering numbers to herself. 7, 11, 13, 19, 23. Why the hell are you counting primes? Mira whispered. It helps keep the voices out, she said, not breaking stride. They reached the deep bore transfer station, a massive underground junction once used to haul raw ore to the surface. Now it was a graveyard. Broken servitors twitched in their docking bays. A loader mech sat frozen mid-stride, its pilot's corpse slumped in the cockpit, grinning. Kale climbed onto a platform overlooking the station. What he saw made his skin crawl. At least 50 infected. Former workers and guards had gathered below. They moved in a slow spiral, stepping in time, dragging their boots to make a pattern in the dust. Their arms were raised, their faces smiling, mouths moving in sync, but the words made no sense. Blessings of the Hollow Father, drink the silence, taste the dust of the stars, wear your face backwards. At the centre of the spiral was a pit, and something was moving inside it, not fully seen, a shifting bulk, a twitch of flesh, long, glistening fingers scrambling at the rim. Emperor save us, Rollo muttered, backing away. A bone cracked behind them. They turned. A man stood in the corridor, half naked, covered in carved symbols, his lips torn by the force of his smile. Blood ran down his face. Brothers, he whispered, the feast begins. He lunged. Kale fired, burning a hole through his chest, but the man didn't scream. He just giggled and fell twitching. Then the others in the spiral turned. Dozens of eyes locked onto them, smiling, running. The survivors fled through the upper gangways, scrambling over rusted ladders and service pipes as screams echoed through the halls. Mira led the way, kicking down panels behind them to block the infected's advance. Rouleau tripped. Kale grabbed his arm. I've got you. Move! Behind them, Liza was grunting, swinging her blade in wild arcs. One infected got too close. She buried her knife in his neck, twisted, and shoved him off the ledge. They didn't stop running until they reached a collapsed pump station. There was no door, just rubble and silence, and for the first time in hours, they breathed. What the hell was in the pit? Mira asked, shaking. I don't know, Kale said, checking his ammo, but it's not human. Did you see how they moved? Rouleau asked. Like they knew we were there the whole time. Like they wanted us to see it. They're not just infected, Mira whispered. They're worshippers. Of what? Liza asked. Kale looked up. Something that lives down there. Something old. Silence. Then Rouleau said, they're not sick. They're converted. Hours passed. The group set up another makeshift barricade using the collapsed ceiling. Liza etched warning glyphs into the floor with chalk. Old underhive trick, she claimed, confused the warp. No one slept. Kale sat against the wall, staring at his boots. He fought orcs, cultists, even Tyranid vanguard strains, but this was worse. It was slow, insidious. You couldn't tell who turned until it was too late. Across from him, Rouleau chucked softly to himself. Kale's hand dropped to his pistol. You okay? He said. Rouleau looked up. I just remembered something my mother used to say. He said, eyes a little too wide. She said the stars blink because they are watching. I always thought that was funny, but now I think they're winking. Kale didn't move. Go to sleep, Rollo, he said quietly. Rollo kept smiling. Kale didn't. Later, Mira woke to the sound of crunching. She turned. Rollo was gone. Blood smeared the wall. A trail led back into the dark tunnels he'd left, smiling. The group was down to 3. They didn't speak much after that. Each step forward felt like a march toward madness. Symbols appeared on the walls where there were none before. Droning hums vibrated in the rock. Sometimes they found other survivors, screaming, smiling, lost. Sometimes they had to kill them. But the next day, Kale found another sealed Imperial Vox unit. He opened it. An automated message played. Evacuation protocols terminated. Imperial cleansing procedures authorized. Do not approach orbital support vessels. Do not approach Imperial personnel. This world is condemned. The message looped again and again. Mira dropped her head into her hands. They're going to glass the planet. They think the infection can spread, Liza muttered. They're right, Kale said. But he wasn't ready to die. Not like this. We find a landing pad, he said. Steal a shuttle. Blast out before they fire. And if we get shot down? Mira asked. Kale loaded his weapon. We die in the sky, not down here with the grinning dead. They moved at dawn, or what passed for it beneath Vascor 9's ash-choked skies. No light ever truly reached the planet's surface, only a reddish hue like old blood soaked into rock. Kale led the way, with Mira at his side, while Liza scouted ahead, blades in hand and eyes sharp. Their destination was platform Kappa 6, a long-abandoned shuttle bay used during the planet's peak mining days. If there were any working ships left, they'd be there. But the path was broken. Collapse, gantries sealed, blast doors, and the infected in every shadow. The further they went, the louder the whispers became. They weren't just hearing voices anymore, they were feeling them. Kale's teeth vibrated with each pulse in the rock, like the planet itself was singing beneath his boots. A low hum, unbroken, ever present, buzzed in the back of his skull. They passed a broken cogitator pillar. It had been smeared in blood and rust, and something had been written across it in jagged script. We are the lips of the god who has no name. Hours passed in the dark. In the ruined remains of Sub-Level 9, they found a camp, long deserted. Crates, rations, even a rusted Vox unit sat abandoned. Mira rushed forward and checked the supplies. Emperor's blood. They left everything. No bodies? Kale asked, scanning the shadows. No. Liza tapped her boot against the floor, her brow furrowed. They didn't leave. They joined something. A crash echoed through the shaft above. All 3 of them froze. A figure dropped down from the ceiling, thin, pale, twitching. It landed with a wet thump and stared at them with glassy eyes. Then it grinned. Childrens of dust, it said softly. You don't have to run. There's room for you in his mouth. Kale raised his weapon. The creature spread its arms. You already hear it. The song. It's in you now. Liza didn't wait. She plunged her blade into its neck. It gargled, then smiled wider as it died. Its last breath came out as a hum. They pushed on in silence, and as they neared the core access elevator, the architecture changed. Walls warped into unfamiliar shapes. The tunnels curved in spirals instead of straight lines. Cables hung like tendrils. Vasca 9 wasn't just dying, it was transforming. Look at this, Mira whispered, pointing at the metal walls. Carved into the alloy were murals, depictions of worship. Human figures knelt around a hole in the earth. Above them loomed a formless shape, all mouths and eyes. Beneath it, curling script. One word repeated over and over. Hollow. 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 Why would miners carve this? Liza asked. They didn't, Kale said. they were told to. The lift shaft was dead, collapsed from above. It left them only one option: a climb down the emergency maintenance tunnel, a vertical drop of 700 meters, lined with ladders and broken scaffolding. They climbed in silence, step by step, sweat and dust clinging to their skin. The air was thick with rot. The whisper song grew louder. Halfway down, Mira stopped. "Kale," she said, voice trembling. "What if we are already infected?" He looked up. "You're not smiling," he said. "But the voices, I hear them. I hear them telling me things, personal things, from my childhood, things no one should know." Kale didn't answer. He didn't need to. He heard them too. At the bottom of the shaft, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Once it had housed transport trains for moving ore. Now it was a temple. Thousands of candles lined the walls. Bones formed strange shapes in the dirt, and at the far end of the room, beneath a sagging arch, stood a massive stone door, black, ancient, and pulsing faintly with a rhythmic heartbeat. It had been opened, just a crack. From beyond it came the song. Not words, just sound, a chorus of hollow voices humming in unison. Mira fell to her knees, clutching her ears. "It's too loud," she sobbed. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" Kale knelt beside her. "Focus. We're almost through. Just breathe." But Liza didn't speak. She stood in front of the door, swaying slightly. "Liza?" She turned slowly. Her eyes were glazed. Her lips trembled with a half-formed smile, and she whispered, "He's so close now. He promised he'll let me see what's underneath." She reached for her knife. Kale shot her before she could raise it. Mira screamed, not because of the shot, but because she realised how close they all were. One whisper too many. One memory twisted too far. The hollow god didn't need to infect their blood. He only needed their minds. They fled the temple, running until their legs failed them. When they finally collapsed in an old ventilation junction, Kale turned off his Vox unit. The whispers still bled through. There was no more safety. Not in the rocks, not in the metal, not even in the silence. Mira lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling. "I'm scared I'll smile while I'm asleep," she whispered. Kale didn't know what to say. Instead, he pressed his hand against hers. "We're getting out," he said. "You hear me? We're getting out." Later, after Mira had dozed off, Kale took out his journal. His hand shook as he wrote. "Liza's gone. The infection is deeper than we thought. I fear it's psychic. The whispers burrow. Even I can hear the song now. It's beautiful. Terrible. Beautiful. We are near the surface level again. Tomorrow, we try for Kappa 6. If there's no shuttle, we run anyway. I have to keep writing. I have to keep thinking. I have to keep being me." He paused, then added, "If you find this," and I'm smiling, "don't hesitate." The song never stopped. It was everywhere now. In the steel, in the earth, in them, and the hollow god was still waiting. The route to platform Kappa 6 was buried beneath the ruins of old freight corridors, half-flooded tunnels and crushed steel veins that twisted through the mountain like broken arteries. Every step Kale and Mira took was slower than the last. The weight of the song pressed harder here, like they were walking into its heart, and yet there was silence too. The infected were nowhere to be seen. No laughter, no chanting, no grinning figures lurking in the corridors. That silence was worse. Kale checked his auspex for the 5th time. "Still clear," he muttered. Mira didn't answer. She was staring at her own reflection in the metal wall, watching her face. "I don't know if it's me anymore," she whispered. "I feel hollow, like I've been scraped out. Kale stopped. "You're still you," he said, gripping her shoulder. "You're still fighting." She didn't smile, and that was a relief. They reached Transit Lift 9B, one of the last working elevators that could take them directly to the surface. Level pads. The shaft was massive, lined with rusted chains and ancient servitor docks. It looked like a coffin standing upright. Kale punched the access code. The lift groaned, then roared to life. It descended slowly, creaking, trembling under its own weight, as if the very structure of the planet wanted to hold them back. Mira leaned against the wall, exhausted. "Do you think anyone's left up there?" she asked. "No idea," Kale replied. "I had a brother. He worked on Lunar Station. Thought maybe he'd get a transfer someday. Thought maybe I'd leave this place." Kale looked at her. "We're not dead. Not yet," she said. Then the lights flickered. The elevator shuddered. For a moment, the mechanism screamed like a tortured metal. The cage slowed, then stopped. Halfway up, Kale checked the control panel. "Dead." "We're stuck," he growled. "Manual climb?" Mira asked. Kale looked up. A service ladder ran alongside the shaft. "It's a long way, but it's that or rot here." Then they both heard it, whistling. Soft, tuneless, echoing through the shaft below them. It was getting closer. They climbed, hand over hand, step by aching step. The metal was slick with condensation and dust. Below them, the whistling grew louder, now joined by quiet giggles and the occasional dragging sound. Mira slipped once, catching herself just before falling. "Hurry!" she cried. They didn't look down. A pale face appeared at the edge of the lift cage. It smiled, then another, and another. Grinning, bloodied, broken things. Human that had once worn jumpsuits and mining gear, now twitching with unholy fever, eyes wide with devotion. One began to laugh. The sound was gurgled, wet, like something trying to imitate joy. They started climbing too. Kale and Mira scrambled upwards, reaching a maintenance door a dozen meters above. Kale wrenched it open and hauled Mira inside just as a hand swiped at her ankle. He slammed the door and jammed a crowbar through the lock. Behind it, the infected pounded, laughed, whispered. Kale turned. They were in a small maintenance control room, dimly lit, dusty, and empty except for a long dead officer slumped in the corner, eyes wrapped tightly around a small black case. Mira pried it from his grip. Inside, a set of keys, a data slate, and a pass card marked Launch Permission, Kappa 6 Shuttle 9. Her eyes widened. It's real. There's still one shuttle. Kale grabbed the card. Then we move, now. The corridor ahead was lined with shattered cogitators and exposed cables, alarms blinking slowly, signalling critical failure. But the closer they got to the launch platform, the more surreal the world became. The walls were covered in spiraling script. The blood traced over every panel. Statues, new ones, had been built from junk and bones. They depicted tall, stretched figures with open mouths and hundreds of teeth. Most faced inward toward the platform doors. As they walked past one, Mira noticed the metal plate at its base. It read, "We sing so the god may wake." The doors to Kappa 6 creaked open. What they saw stopped them cold. The shuttle bay was real, a wide hangar, once built to launch mining shuttles during evacuations. Towering scaffolds reached towards a cracked ceiling where faint starlight bled through. As the far end, a black and white shuttle, battered but intact. But surrounding it, dozens of infected knelt in a perfect circle. They weren't moving. They weren't speaking. They were just smiling, eyes closed, waiting. In the centre before the shuttle ramp stood a woman in a tattered robe of stitched flak armour and robes, anointed in dried blood. Her face was marked with black ink spirals carved into her cheeks. She turned to face them and smiled. "You came," she said, her voice like velvet scraping over steel. "The Hollow Father welcomes your devotion." Mira raised her gun. "We're not here to pray." The woman tilted her head. "You already have. Every step, every doubt, every scheme. Each is a hymn." Kale stepped forward. "Move, or I move you." The priestess' smile only widened. "We've already won. You carry him now, in your dreams, in your bones. You just don't know it yet." Then she lunged. Gunfire ripped through the air. Kale fired first, striking in the chest. But she kept moving. Mira shot again and again until the priestess crumpled, giggling as blood frothed from her lips. Around them, the infected twitched, then rose, all at once, eyes wide, grins carved into their skin, for the Hollow God. Kale and Mira ran, blasting through the mob. They weaved and ducked under graping hands. One infected caught Mira's jacket. She spun and drove a knife into its throat. Kale dropped free with his las pistol, then kicked the shuttle's ramp release. The hatch opened. Mira drove inside first. Kale followed, slamming the controls. The hatch hissed shut. Through the viewport, the infected slammed against the hull, laughing, whispering, bleeding. Mira punched in the launch codes. Engines roared to life. The shuttle lifted, leaving the horrors of Kappa 6 behind. Kale collapsed into a seat, staring at his hands. Mira sat beside him, shaking. "Did we make it?" she asked. Kale looked out at the stars and frowned. Above the planet, he saw a fleet of Imperial ships, but they weren't coming to rescue. They were repositioning. The largest vessel had opened its primary ventral bay. A weapon system the size of a city was glowing, charging. The shuttle breached the upper atmosphere of Vascor 9 like a dying bird, breaking free from a nightmare. The stars above looked wrong, distant, uncaring. The flicker of void ships hung in low orbit, drifting like carrion birds waiting to feast. Kale sat in the co-pilot's seat, his knuckles white on the controls. Sweat poured from his brow as he adjusted the trajectory manually. Auto-nav systems were still syncing with the Imperial fleet's beacons. "They're not responding," Mira said, peering at the comms panel. "No hails, just static." Kale adjusted the frequency. "Imperial High Command, this is Shuttle 09 from Kappa 6. 2 survivors. Repeat, 2 survivors requesting docking clearance. Please respond." The only reply was the low drone of the void. Then came a ping. A transmission. Text only. It reads, "Remain stationary. Clearance denied. Await judgment." "Judgment?" Mira said, her voice hollow. Kale looked through the canopy at the largest of the ships, an Avenger-class purifier. Its hull bristled with lances and bombardment ports, but the one that drew his eye was the glowing sun-bright cylinder beneath its keel. A cyclonic torpedo launcher, the kind used to wipe entire worlds clean of infection. "They're going to burn the planet," Kale whispered. Mira shook her head. "We're off-world. We made it." Kale pointed. Another shuttle, smaller, sleeker, launched from one of the escort freights. Its paint bore the symbol of the Adeptus Astartes, a crimson skull on a field of bone. The Carcharodons, space marines. "They're sending someone down," Mira said. "Maybe they're clearing a corridor for survivors." But Kale didn't speak. He knew what that symbol was. The Carcharodons weren't rescuers. They were executioners. The shuttle's proximity alarm blared as the Astartes craft closed distance. Kale kept his hands on the controls, hovering just below the outer defence line. A new signal came in. This one was audio, a voice like gravel and thunder. Shuttle 09. This is Brother Reva, Vicar, of the Carcharodon's Astra. By order of the Ordo, Sempaltrum, and the Lords of Terror, you are to prepare for immediate quarantine enforcement. No sudden movements. Miera blinked. Quarantine enforcement? Kale's stomach turned. They weren't going to be checked. They were going to be cleansed. We're not infected, Kale barked into the mic. We escaped. We made it off the surface. There was a pause. Then Viacor spoke again. Your words mean nothing. The hollow god speaks through the minds of its vessels. It sings in silence. It hides in thought. You are contaminated. The line cut. Turn us around, Miera said quickly. We'll run. Kale didn't move. We can't outrun a strike cruiser. They're going to kill us. Kale stared at the incoming shuttle. Its weapons were armed, boarding claws extended. I've got an idea, he muttered. He spun the ship and dropped them back into the thin upper atmosphere, skimming the edge of re-entry. The hull groaned. Flames licked the windows. Behind them, the Carcharodon shuttle followed, weapons still locked. They want to do it clean, Kale said. Execute us in orbit and collect the debris. But if we drop back into the edge of Vascor's gravity, we might lose them in the ion storm. That's not a plan, Miera shouted. That's a suicide pact. It's better than sitting still and waiting for a bolt round in the teeth. They dove. The Carcharodon shuttle pursued, closer now, launching flares to blind their sensors. Then, without warning impact, the enemy shuttle clipped their wing. Warning lights screamed. Systems failed. The shuttle spiraled, hull ablaze. Miera screamed as they broke through the cloud layer. The landscape of Vascor 9 rushed up to meet them, black, scorched, split open like a cracked skull. Kale grabbed the emergency yoke and wrenched it sideways. The shuttle clipped a spire of rock, spun wildly, then slammed into the mountainside. Darkness, silence, smoke, then pain. Kale woke first. Blood tickled down his temple. Miera was unconscious, but breathing. He pulled her from the wreckage as the shuttle burned behind them. They were back on the surface, back in hell. In the distance, the infected gathered around a massive, jagged crater. The chanting had returned, louder than ever, and in the sky the Purifier ship moved into position. The cyclonic launcher began to glow. Miera stirred. We're back. Kale nodded, not for long. He helped her to her feet. That's when the second shuttle landed. Not the Carcharodons this time. A squad of space marines, black armoured giants with death masks, descended from the hatch. They moved with ruthless precision. Bolters ready. Stay down, Kale said, but Miera stumbled. One of the marines saw her. There, he barked. Kale raised his hands. Wait, we're not infected. She's not. The marine raised his bolter. Fired. Miera's body crumpled into the ground, a perfect hole in her chest. Kale screamed. He fired blindly, wildly, lasbolts sparking off of Sermite armour. The marines didn't fire back. They just walked towards him, methodical, unstoppable. He ran, through dust and ruin, over bones and symbols. Behind him the sky began to pulse with deep, terrifying light. The cyclonic torpedo was almost ready. He didn't stop running until the marines gave up the chase, or maybe they just let him go. He climbed a jagged ridge. At the top, he turned and looked back. The infected had gathered into the crater now. Hundreds, maybe thousands, dancing in ecstatic horror around a pulsing fissure of flesh and stone. The hollow god had begun to rise, and the stars blinked. Above the Avenger-class ship released its payload. A beam of white fire cut through the heavens. The air boiled. The crater vanished. The dance ended. Vasconine screamed one final time, then ceased. Kale stood alone, watching the fire consume the world. His ears bled, his skin blistered, his soul trembled. Then silence, true final silence. Behind him, a dropship descended. A voice called his name. He didn't turn, not yet. Not while the last echoes of the hollow song still danced in the ash. Kale didn't speak for a long time. The dropship landed behind him, stirring clouds of black dust that mingled with the rising heat still pouring from the impact zone. The silence after the cyclonic strike was deafening. Vasconine, once a world of toil and torment, now looked like a cracked cinder, a scorched shell. Everything below the ridge had been reduced to slag. Minerals boiled, bones turned to mist, faith melted into soot. A voice filtered through the static of his damaged vox bead. Survivor located. Confirmed human. Genetic markers matched. Quarantine team inbound. Kale didn't turn. His eyes were locked on the place where Mira had fallen. There was nothing left of her now, not even ash, just a scorched outline on blackened rock. He whispered her name once more, then stood. The ramp of the dropship hissed open. Down it came the inquisitorial cleanser team, a unit clad in sterile white armour, masks like bird skulls, flame units slung at their slides. They moved like machines, every step synchronized. Behind them a single figure in gold-trimmed black emerged, tall, lean, wearing the rosette of the Ordum Specturion. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Inquisitor Merida Elvos, she said. You were Kale Brenner, former Imperial Guard, conscripted to Vasconine mining rotation. You survived planetary cleansing. I need to know why. Kale's voice was rough. I kept running. No, she said. That's not enough. Inside the dropship, Kale sat beneath harsh lights while scanners hummed around him. He was stripped, decontaminated, scraped, scanned, and questioned again and again. Were you exposed to the source? Did you ever hear voices when no one spoke? Did you feel a presence in your dreams? Did you ever doubt yourself? He answered with the truth, but every word felt like it pulled something loose from inside him, something fragile. At one point a servo skull floated close and whispered, You smiled in your sleep. Kale crushed it against the wall. Later, in the sterile chamber that passed for a Medicaid bay, he was left alone, or so he thought. A single figure entered, another space marine, but not from the Carcharodons. His armour was pure black with silver trim, no chapter sigils, just a blank burning stare. You ran, the marine said. His voice was like thunder caged behind reverence. Kale looked up, half expecting execution. I survived, he rasped. No, the marine said. You were chosen. Kale frowned. What? But the marine said no more. He turned and left. That night Kale dreamed, not of Mira or of the hollow god. He dreamed of the deep void and of the whispers that now echoed with clarity into his madness. You saw the song and did not sing. You walked among the worshippers and did not kneel. You were hollow but unfilled. And then a single word echoed like a chime of bone. Witness. The next day, Inquisitor Elvos returned. You are being sent off-world, she said, without ceremony. The cleansing was successful, but the infection's nature is not fully understood. We cannot risk lingering exposure. Then why am I still alive? Kale asked. Elvos regarded him carefully. Because you saw something we didn't. You fought it and endured. That makes you useful. Useful? She leaned closer. It's not the first world. It won't be the last. The Hollow God has many faces, many songs. Vascor was merely the latest shrine. He felt the words like knives under his ribs. You're going to use me. Yes. Kale stood numb. And if I refuse? You won't, she said. You've already been marked. Hours later, Kale boarded a black ship with no insignia. Inside, the halls were quiet, lit by a golden lumen strip, and incensed with oils that smelled like sanctified rust. In a private chamber, he found a simple bench and a data slate. On it was a name, Praxis Station 443, a new assignment, a new threat, another world teetering on the edge of infection, another choir warming up. Before departure, he stood at the viewpoint one last time. The remains of Vascal 9 hung below, a fractured skull of a world, still burning at the edges where cyclonic fire had licked into its core. Mira was there. So were Rulo, and Dren, and Liza. All of them lost. All of them taken or burned to the keep, what stirred beneath the surface from spreading. He pressed a hand to the glass, and for a moment he almost smiled. Then he stopped himself. He wasn't ready to sing. Not yet. The black ship's engines hummed with the kind of silence only deep void could offer, so quiet it made your bones ache. Kale Brenner sat alone in his cell-like quarters, watching the stars drift past. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. The crew didn't speak. The servitors didn't blink. Even the Inquisition agents moved like phantoms, tending only to their cryptic rituals and sealed orders. He was cargo now, a living artifact of something they didn't understand, and perhaps something they feared. The data slate in their hands was blank, except for a single phrase, freshened daily at precisely the same time. Await further instructions. Do not think of the song. But of course he did. Every night in the dark, the hollow gods whispered, still pressed at the edges of his consciousness. Not a voice, but a sensation, like hands brushing the side of his skull, testing, tapping. It never spoke again. It didn't need to. They arrived at Praxis Station 443 after 16 standard days and Mechanicus refinery orbiting the dead moon, Ferrin's Hollow. The station was suspended in nothing, tethered by gravity generators and machine prayers. Kale was greeted by a squad of crimson Scions, stormtroopers tasked with watching him. Not protecting him, watching. Inquisitor Elvos met him in a chapel deep within the station's subcore. The walls were lined with purity seals, candles burned without oxygen. Something stirs here, she said, gesturing to a data slate marked with spreading patterns of shipboard insanity. 6 cases of spontaneous glossolia, 2 confirmed suicides, 3 smiling breakdowns. They speak of a deep silence coming for them. Kale felt the chill in his gut. It's spreading. She nodded. And you've survived it once. Kale's laugh was bitter. You don't survive it, you just walk away from the ashes. The days that followed were a haze of testing, analysis and surveillance. Kale wandered the upper decks, staring at blinking lights and tech priests whispering Barn Harrick prayers that no longer sounded entirely mechanical. He passed a mirror once, caught himself smiling only for a second. On the 4th day something changed. A ship docked. An Imperial freighter. He didn't recognize its markings. The cargo was human, refugees apparently, survivors from a distant world lost in warp storms. But when they stepped off the ramp, Kale saw their eyes. Too wide, too bright, and one of them, a little girl no longer older than 8, looked right at him and smiled, not with joy, with recognition. Kale turned to leave, only to find a man waiting at the far end of the corridor, pale, robed in ragged priest garb. His face was familiar. It was Rulo, or something wearing Rulo's face. He didn't speak. He simply stood, smiling. Kale raised his sidearm without thinking. When he blinked, Rulo was gone. He ran to the nearest Vox terminal. Inquisitor Elvos, The station is compromised. I saw one of them. But static was his only answer. Then a voice broke through the interference, but it wasn't Elvos. Did you miss me? Kale recoiled. The voice wasn't coming from the Vox. It was inside him. The lights died. Sirens began to blare. A station-wide lockdown engaged. Red strobes painted the corridors in warning colours. Over the intercom, a new voice whispered, "It wasn't human. The mouth opens. The song begins anew." Praxis 443 descended into chaos. Kale moved on instinct, navigating half-lit tunnels as screams echoed through the bulkheads. The infected spread fast, faster than on Vascor. They were smarter now, more coordinated. They'd learned, and now they hunted. Kale passed a tech priest, sobbing over a dead servitor, then calmly slicing his own tongue out with a cog blade. He saw a group of crewmen kneeling in a ring, humming in perfect harmony. He didn't stop. He made for the primary spire, where the emergency escape vessels were docked, but as he reached the central lift, a squad of space marines blocked his path. Carcharodons again. He froze. The lead Astartes stepped down. "Kale Brenner, you are marked." Kale raised his hand slowly. "Then kill me." The marine said nothing. Another voice came over the marine's internal vox, loud enough to echo from the speaker on his poldron. "Inquisitor Elvos, stand down, brother Vacor. He's not the threat. He's in the vector. He is the warning. He is the witness." The marine hesitated, then turned away. Kale bolted for the evac pad. Only one vessel remained. He entered, sealing the hatch as red lights bathed the launch bay. Below, he could feel song blooming, like a flower of black light deep in the station's heart. Praxis would fall, just like Vascor, and more would follow, unless someone remembered, unless someone carried the truth. He keyed in a manual override. Destination, orbit. As the ship tore free of the station's gravlock, he looked back through the viewport. Praxis shimmered, shaking as energy built within its core. The air around it distorted. Spires cracked and fell away. Then came the light. A cleansing beam from above. An orbital cannon fired by the waiting Purifer ship. The same type that erased Vascor. The same judgment. The song ended in fire. Kale watched in silence, then turned to the small terminal at his side. He opened a new message log, began to type. "To the Ordo Septalorum. My name is Kale Brenner. I've seen 2 worlds fall. I've seen the hollow god sing through silence, and wear the faces of the dead. It is not a plague. It is not a curse. It is a signal, and it is getting louder. If you find this log and I'm smiling, don't hesitate." He hit send. As the stars flickered beyond the viewport, Kale leaned back. His reflection in the glass showed a tired man, haunted, but not smiling. Not yet.